living with narcolepsy.
How do you feel today? Did you sleep well? How many times in a day do you say, "I'm tired"? Let's take a short walk in the shoes of the weary. Have you ever stayed awake for 24 hours? Perhaps because of a deadline, or you've been travelling. How did you feel when you had to stay awake for 24 hours? What if it was 2 days later and you still haven't slept? It's now Wednesday morning and you've had no sleep. How would you feel after 48 hours without sleep? How would your eyes feel? Your stomach? Your mind? Would you be able to think clearly? How would you feel emotionally? What if you got out of bed on Monday morning and just could not sleep? How would you feel by Thursday morning? You've not been able to lie down and enjoy a long, deep, undisturbed sleep for 3 days. People living with narcolepsy learn to live with this level of weariness. They hope for the days when they'll feel they've been awake for 48 hours, but some days it's more like 72 hours without sleep. How would you feel? Narcolepsy is a lifetime of feeling like you've been awake for 48 to 72 hours. It's a disorder of the nervous system, causing excessive daytime sleepiness, often falling asleep involuntarily multiple times each day, even after an average length nighttime sleep, often not realising you've been asleep and in front of others. You also have fragmented nighttime sleep. So how would that impact your life and your work? That level of weariness impacts your emotions. If you were that tired all the time, do you think you could feel the extremes of emotion? Happiness, sadness, anger, surprise? Would it impact your inclination to laugh out loud? What if feeling any of these strong emotions led to the muscles in your face weakening, your speech slurring, so that you looked drunk or drug affected? Or your legs get weak, and your knees give out, and you end up on the ground unable to move, but conscious. It doesn't last long, but it can be very distressing. This is cataplexy. The muscles fall asleep, but the person stays conscious. Sadly, many people living with narcolepsy also have cataplexy. People living with narcolepsy learn to avoid extreme emotions. How would that impact your day, your life, or your love life? In order to understand narcolepsy, we have to talk a little about sleep. Most of us take falling to sleep for granted. It takes us on average about 15 minutes to fall asleep at night, and we move through sleep patterns of REM and non-REM. REM sleep is where the brain is most active when we experience dreams, often vivid and bizarre. It's also where our muscles in our legs and arms are temporarily paralysed as a barrier to us acting out our dreams. Deep, restful sleep happens in the non-REM. Most healthy people begin in non-REM sleep and will cycle through to REM sleep, and this will happen multiple times in a night. However, people living with narcolepsy fall asleep quickly and transition quickly into REM. They fall asleep multiple times, night and day, sometimes in front of people. They frequently wake with very clear memories and emotions from vivid cinematic dreams. Remember, strong emotions can trigger cataplexy, so this is often not pleasant. As you drift off to sleep or you wake up, have you ever thought you heard or saw someone in the room? These hallucinations can be quite frightening, but it's perfectly normal. The problem is that people with narcolepsy can experience these multiple times each day. Sleep paralysis is where you are awake but unable to move. It can happen after a very short sleep. Sometimes they don't even realise they've been asleep but experience the paralysis. Luckily it's short-lived, but again often happens in front of people. Narcolepsy is invisible. Most people know someone with diabetes, heart disease, epilepsy or cancer. They may even know a bit about the diseases. Most people know nothing about narcolepsy and don't know anyone who has it. Consequently, there's a lack of understanding and empathy for those who live with this disease. In fact, people make comedy skits about falling asleep inappropriately and everyone laughs. Or people say things like, "How lovely, you get to sleep all day." The lack of understanding is staggering. In fact, narcolepsy can be dangerous. People living with narcolepsy are often not allowed to drive, or they're allowed to drive on restricted licences once their medication is stabilised. Cataplexy can result in hard falls, bruises, cuts, etc. And even if it hurts, they can't rub it or address it until their body wakes up and they can move again. International travel is also complicated, as they must travel with some very serious medication. Narcolepsy is genetic. No one did anything wrong. It isn't a consequence of poor decisions, but may be the consequence of a head injury. However, you need not have any history of narcolepsy in your family. Anyone can get narcolepsy. About 1 in 2,000 people is living with narcolepsy. Narcolepsy presents at all ages. Narcolepsy often presents during adolescence, which makes diagnosis particularly difficult. Young people manage increasing study and often work commitments. Their body clock alters as they progress through puberty, and there's an acceptance that teenagers sleep a lot. However, excessive sleepiness must be investigated. If an otherwise healthy teenager is falling asleep on the way to and from school, if they just can't stay awake in class, they may take on a glassy or faraway look and not remember what just happened. It's not necessarily because they're ignoring you. They may have had a sleep episode. They may react strangely when emotional, but remember, not all people with narcolepsy have cataplexy. Please seek advice and persist if you are not satisfied. People have a poor understanding of narcolepsy and are often willing to accept that a teenager is just acting out or wanting extra attention. It's a parent's role to get informed and educate others. Children often have little influence when they come up against school policy or poorly informed teachers. Teens living with narcolepsy will fall asleep in class. They will look vacant from time to time as they experience sleep episodes. The teachers simply cannot take this personally, any more than they would if a child had an epileptic seizure in their class. Schools must allow the teen to take their medications when they are due, regardless of whether it's break time, just as they would for a child with diabetes. More respectful and progressive schools make a rest space available for their students. Often a 30-minute sleep will allow them to finish the day and concentrate. They can also be allowed more flexibility with due dates and can be given more time to sit their exams, just like other children living with a chronic life-changing disease. There isn't a cure for narcolepsy yet, but we are forever hopeful. Funding for research is desperately required to find better solutions for people living with narcolepsy. GPs know very little about narcolepsy. As people present with chronic tiredness, inability to finish tasks, lack of energy and difficulty with strong emotions, they are often misdiagnosed with mental health issues. Only persistence and frustration keeps people coming back to the GP until they can get a referral to a specialist and the correct testing. Narcolepsy is experienced in different ways by different people. Narcolepsy is difficult to live with. However, some people manage to hold down full-time jobs, hobbies, voluntary work, tertiary studies, grow healthy and happy families, and continue with their lives, while others are in wheelchairs or on disability pensions. The treatments available in Australia are limited by government import restrictions. Many people in the USA enjoy a much better quality of life due to access to drugs Australia will not allow in the country due to fear of criminal misuse, despite the good the drugs would do for people living with narcolepsy. The benefits would far outweigh the risk. So people in Australia live through a series of trial and error decisions regarding drug choice and dose. There are very few specialists trained in the treatment of narcolepsy in Australia, and very few general practitioners understand the disorder. People living with narcolepsy are intelligent, courageous, passionate, enthusiastic, otherwise healthy people who live with a chronic lifelong disease and have learned to appreciate all that life has to offer. People living with narcolepsy are just like you. They're mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, students, solicitors, journalists. They're even personal trainers. You'll never know if someone is living with narcolepsy unless they confide in you. If someone does tell you they're living with narcolepsy, what will you do? Hopefully, you now understand about narcolepsy, but it would be so much better if you remembered how it would feel to live in their place. And next time you say you're tired, we'll try to be patient with you. Be grateful every day for restful sleep, waking up refreshed, for the energy to enjoy exercise and play, let 3 p.m. flat spots pass, for laughter and tears. And look for the opportunity to give someone living with narcolepsy a chance. They deserve it.